What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We got another slow 6 fix for you. This should be a fairly easy one. So today we're going to be changing the valve cover gasket set on a Focus ST. Okay, so we have the new valve cover gasket set. I got a Ford one. There's the part number. I'll put it in the description of the video. And it's funny, it doesn't come in a box. It just comes in this bag. There's a couple pieces to it. We'll get to that in a minute. So you're going to need that. You're going to need caffeine. And you're going to need a little bit of RTV. We'll get to that later. So, like I said, this should be a fairly easy job. You just got to take a little bit of stuff apart. Step one, you're going to need to yank off your cover if you still have one on your car. It just pops off. Put that out of the way. And bam, now we have valve cover to be able to get to. Now you're going to see there's a couple things in your way. Your intake tube is going to be in the way, so we're going to need to remove at least a couple sections of that. You're going to need to take your dipstick out because it's going to be in the way, and you're going to need to disconnect some stuff. So step one, we're going to remove this intake air box, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so one of the questions you may be asking yourself is, why would I need to be changing the valve cover gasket? Now, one would obviously be if it's just kind of leaking kind of around the gasket. It doesn't really look like mine is. That just looks like it's dirty. But the other thing is, I found this when I changed the plugs in my car. So if you pull your coil pack out and your coil pack is oily, that is typically an indication that your valve cover gasket is leaking. So we're going to go ahead and change this. Now, like I said, step one, we're going to need to remove at least this portion of your intake tube. You can most likely leave the rest of the box on there. So you're just going to have a little 8mm bolt there. Similar should be somewhere on this side. And then you should be able to just pull this section off. There's going to be one more bolt right here that's going to be holding this tube on. You should just be able to pull that out. Your Symposer tube, this thing, might kind of pop out. It's just kind of in that same section. Shouldn't be a big deal. Just pull that out. So bolt, bolt, bolt. That should come off. All right, so once you have your intake tube off, you may need to take this section off. That's going to go to your turbo. It's kind of a pain. There's a bolt down there. You're going to see there's a decent amount of stuff you're going to need to remove from your valve cover. So step one, we're going to take the coil packs out. You can leave the plugs in. There's just these little 8mm bolts. Pretty easy to get off. And then you're going to need to disconnect some of this stuff. So you can see there's a bunch of things kind of clipped on to the valve cover that you're going to need to remove. We'll go over all that. But I'm going to take the coil packs out and we'll go from there. All right, so turn that off. Makes the video look weird. So I got my coil packs out. You can see cylinder 2 and cylinder 3 are kind of wet with oil. 1 and 4 are fine. But that's a sign that your valve cover is leaking. You can't really see it, but on the video. But if you go in, look in there, there's a bunch of oil in there. I did have to take this back intake tube off. There is a PCV valve that's going to be on the back of your valve cover. Right there. You're going to need to unclip. And then next step is we're going to need to pull this wiring harness up. You can just kind of pull this off. You might need a flathead screwdriver. There's 1, 2, 3, and then it does kind of clip back there as well. You're also going to need to disconnect your valve timing solenoid deal here. So you're going to need to disconnect both of those. Oil cap can stay on. Dipstick needs to come out. And then once we do all that, we'll show you all the bolts that need to come out. Got everything mostly disconnected. These just kind of pop off. I just used a flathead to get them off these bolts. I don't know what this is from. And then you're going to be able to see the bolts for the most part. You know, 1, 2, 3. Here's one kind of back here. Don't forget, there's going to be 1, 2, and then there's a third one in the middle, I believe. There's going to be a couple in kind of the valley by the plugs. And then there's some here and here. Now, one tricky part, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. There's going to be like a little bracket back here, kind of where my light is. Not this O-ring thing, but right behind it, where I'm pointing the light, there's a bracket that's going to hold the wiring harness on, and it is kind of screwed into the valve cover. So we're going to need to take that off. I'm not going to be able to video that. That's going to be kind of hard to reach, but it is right back there. And then once you do that, should be able to take all these bolts out. They're 8mm, and then you should be able to just pop the valve cover off. Your cam solenoids you can leave in there, so you don't need to remove those. So here's the bolt that I was referring to. It's kind of on the back of the head there. It's a 13mm head bolt. I got it off. It's honestly pretty tight. You'll notice there's some Loctite on it. I got it off with a 13mm socket on a long flex head ratchet to break it loose because it's really tight. And then I used a flex head wrench, ratcheting wrench, to get it out the rest of the way. Once you do that, there's kind of like a little bit of a harness bracket right here. That's going to come up right here. Zoom in a little. It's essentially like right here. That's going to be the last thing that's going to be kind of in your way for the valve cover. And there's actually a bolt underneath that bracket that you're going to need to take off. So once you have all that apart, we can start taking these bolts off. Like I said, they're 8mm. It's my 8. It's my 7. But you're going to take all these out. You're going to need to take your dipstick out. And then we should be able to kind of pry this up. Now this thing, this set of vacuum lines, I don't know if you need to disconnect this or not. If you do, get a pair of channel locks. You can crimp these in so you can pull the line off. I'm thinking there's enough line here that I can just move this out of the way and not have to disconnect it, but we'll see. All right, we have all the bolts out, loosey-goosey. Now, here's the fun part, is trying to get this off. So you're going to notice there's some areas, there's like kind of a little bit of a corner that you kind of get your finger underneath. That you can use to kind of pry the valve cover up off of the block. And then the hard part is going to be getting these cam timing solenoids, whatever these are, out of the gasket in here, and I'm having a hard time with that one. So I sprayed a little bit of penetrating oil in there to try and see if I can loosen those up a little bit so I can get the valve cover off. But basically, you're almost going to need to bring this side up first so that you can clear this, and then the rest of it should come out pretty easily. So I'm going to fight with this for a little bit, but your mileage may vary. Once you have all the bolts out, it's just a matter of prying it off. I would not recommend using anything particularly sharp because you're working up against the block and you don't want to scratch up the surface. So don't use a screwdriver, preferably. Okay, so we got it off. You can see where that middle was leaking into my spark plug holes. The other downfall is I actually broke these two valve VVT gaskets. Removing it, they are stuck on the VVT solenoid. So the bad news is the Ford valve cover gasket kit does not come with the new seals for that. So I'm probably gonna have to run to the parts store and see if I can get those. But yeah, there's your valve cover off. And basically all you're going to do from this point is you're just going to need to change the gasket and re-seal everything. So you're going to want to clean up your block mating surface. You're going to see there's, you know, some grime and stuff on the block here. Stupid light makes the video weird. And then kind of in some of these corners, you're going to have what they call like a bridge piece. So basically that's just going to be like a dab of RTV. You're going to see there's 4 spots. There's one there. There's one kind of on the other side. And then there's 2 kind of in the back corners as well. So you're going to want to take all those off. But yeah, other than that, everything looks fine. Cam lobes look good. You know, a little bit of wear on them, but not bad for a 100,000 mile car. You can check your timing chain while you're here. It's going to have a little bit of tension, a little bit of play to it. That's fine. Timing chain looks good. So we're going to take an intermission. I'm going to see if I can find those seals, and then we'll seal everything back up. And, you know, installation is just kind of the reverse of what you just did. So we'll get to it. Okay, quick trip to O'Reilly's, and we have some VVT solenoid gaskets. Thankfully, they had 2 Mahle ones in stock. So that is what I tore, and I'll show you getting those old ones off. So I now have all my gaskets. There's my valve cover gasket, and also it's officially beer 30 on this project. So what we're going to do now is we're going to clean up the gasket surface and then install these new VVT solenoids in the valve cover, and then we should just be putting everything back together. So in terms of removing your remaining piece of that solenoid, I'm just going to try and knock it out with a mallet and a screwdriver. You want to be careful because this valve cover is plastic. You don't want to break it. It's stuck in there pretty good. There we go. All right, that's knocked out. So you do not want to install it that way because you're going to tear the gasket. So from an installation standpoint, I'm not really sure if it's easier to install these from the bottom or from the top. I don't know if it really matters. I'm going to get rid of that piece. I'm going to clean out this inside edge. That's just kind of a paper towel, and we'll show you putting them in, and hopefully that'll go pretty easy. Okay, so you can now see my old VVT solenoid gaskets are torn and stuck on the solenoid. So I'm going to use this little like pick I have essentially. You don't want to scratch these up a bunch, but I should be able to just kind of slide that in there and use it to pull that off. I'm going to probably need both hands. Come from the bottom side. There we go. I should be able to slide it up with that. So I'm going to have to take those off, and then you're going to need to reinstall those into your valve cover. Now, given the way that came off, I'm guessing these install from the bottom. I'll have to look. And then you're going to want to take out your valve cover gasket in here. Once again, you can use this if you want. You should be able to just pull it out with your fingers. Now, this middle one is where it was leaking, and you can see it looks like it's this top section right here that was leaking a decent amount, where you can see the gasket looks a little funky. That's probably what was wetting down my spark plugs. So I'm going to pull all that out, and we'll show you getting everything back together, and we'll go from there. These ones are bone dry, so that explains why cylinders 1 and 4, although that one's starting to tear a little bit too. See that little piece of rubber right there? Were dry, and then cylinders 2 and 3, the plugs were covered in oil because this was leaking. I don't really see anything leaking around any of the other edges, so your mileage may vary. Okay, so in terms of putting these back in the valve covers, here's my new one. There's going to be kind of like a rounded edge here and that edge. Now this side is going to go in the top of the valve cover, and honestly these feel like I should be able to just kind of slide them in there. Oh, yeah. So these new ones are easy enough that I can actually just work them in, I think. Now, the other thing you can do is put a little bit of oil on the edge of this so you can get it in. Or maybe slightly tap it. Or the third option is you can get a socket that's big enough that you can kind of drive that in. So, like I said, it's going to go kind of in there. So I'm going to finish kind of working these down in here, and then we'll go through putting the valve cover seal, gasket seals, and everything back in. Okay, so everything's cleaned off pretty well. I used a razor blade to kind of scrape some of that RTV off, and then use some brake cleaner to kind of clean the surfaces off. Also, now's not a terrible time to change the plugs if you need to. I just put new plugs in this like a week ago, so I'm going to leave them as is. I am going to pull these middle two out and try and clean the oil out of those holes, though. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then it's basically time to put it back together. I sprayed some brake cleaner in the gasket surfaces in the valve cover just to try and get the oil out of there, and then we'll put the gasket back in, and then we'll start putting everything back together. Okay, so you're going to want some sort of oil resistant gasket maker. This is ultra black. You could probably use ultra gray as well. And your 4 spots are going to be right there, kind of opposite on the timing cover, or where the timing chain is. And like I said, the 2 areas where that gasket kind of bridges over on either side. You just put a little drop on each of those, and then we're ready to put this back together. Okay, so we got this all cleaned up. We got our VVT solenoids in here. Although I think I have one not down the whole way. That one's not down the whole way. So now we're going to install our gaskets. They're pretty self-explanatory. Your big one is going to go on the outside. So if you look at it, there's going to be 2 kind of like round edges. Those are going to go over here on this side. So basically, let's stick that in there like so. And you're going to notice, I'll pick the camera up and show you, there's going to be some little like notches that are going to help you orient the gasket as far as how it's supposed to go in, so that you have it seated correctly. So basically, you're just going to work that around, seat that in. Some of the areas where the bolt holes are, you're going to notice there's like kind of a little round like cutout for it. This part's pretty self-explanatory. It's kind of hard to screw up. Make sure that's all down in there. Yep. Yeah, you want to make sure this is in the valve cover the whole way correctly, because otherwise it is not going to seal. And that is the whole reason you're doing this job. So make sure you do that. And then this big square one. Now this is the one that was actually leaking on my set here. So Same thing. I don't think it really matters which side you put down on these. They look the same. That's going to go in the middle in here. And then the one section is going to go actually above the bolt hole. When I was cleaning the gasket surface off on the block, you could see where this middle one was leaking, and I pulled my plugs out, tried to clean some of the oil out of that hole and cleaned the plugs off because they were oily, and that's not going to be ideal for your spark. And then these two little ones are going to go in these outer portions. So once again, they're hard to screw up because they're different. So the one with the little bolt cut out is going to go on this one. There we go. Let me make sure you put it in the correct direction. That one does have to go a certain way in. Push that down. Get that all nicely in there. And then this last one is going to go in this last one that you don't have a gasket in. So those are going to be sealing off your spark plug holes to the cylinder head. And like I said, mine was the middle one was what was leaking, so. All right, so that's all in there. Now, as far as what I was saying about like the little notches, I'm gonna zoom in here. So there we go. So, you know, there's kind of little holes around the bolt holes that gasket's gonna go in, and then right in there, you can see there's like little notches for the gasket. So make sure that's all in there. There's your middle one. You can see it goes around that bolt hole. That one. That one. Like I said, pretty hard to screw up. I did spray some brake cleaner in these surfaces just to try and clean them out. But that's easy enough. And then I'll show you where you're going to put some RTB dabs on this next section. Okay, so here's your RTV spots there. Over there. 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 I got a little bit too much on that one. And then this like back corner side, I can't really see. So once you do that, you're going to want to put your valve cover back on before it dries. So pro tip, in terms of the VVT solenoids, take your finger, take a little bit of oil, put them on the inside of that. It's going to help you slide them back over. And then I'll post the torque sequence in the video, but once you kind of hand tighten all of the bolts, we'll show you there's a torque sequence and a torque spec to these. It's very small. You do not want to break these off in the block in the head. Okay, so that slid right on the VVT solenoids with a little bit of oil. Give it a little bit of force, but not bad. Everything hand tight now, and now you're going to want to torque it down. It's a 3-step process, and it is in inch pounds, not foot pounds. Do not do foot pounds. You will snap one of these bolts right off in the head, and then you're going to take it all apart and try and extract that. So you're going to need an inch pound torque wrench. I have this Harbor Freight deal, and then I'll post both the pattern and the specs in the video here in a second, and you'll kind of have to go through it like 3 times because you're meant to do it in steps. So I'm going to do that. All right, so we got everything torqued down, and now we're just essentially reassembling. So you're going to need to plug everything back in. You're going to need to plug in your VVT solenoid. You're going to need to plug your wiring harness back wherever it needs to go. And then, plug this back in, put your coil packs back in. I'm not really going to film this part because it's easy enough. You're going to put that bracket back on. That's a pain in the butt. FYI, it's 89 inch-pounds, which is 10 Newton meters. It's very, very light on the valve cover. It's plastic, and the bolts are small, and you don't want to break them off in the head, like I said. So I'm going to get back to work and reassembling this, and we'll show the final product. Okay, then. Everything back together. Like I said, installation, reverse of removal. Put all your coil packs in, put your dipstick back in, put your air box back on. Make sure you plug everything in, including these and your VVT solenoids. Clip your wiring harnesses back on. And then ideally you're probably going to want to wait to start this so that little dabs of RTV dry. Given how small they are, they probably shouldn't take super long to dry, but if you have the ability to wait, I would wait for a few hours. But that should be it. Another slow 6 fix.